I'm Matt Bishar with NAREIT.com here in Phoenix, Arizona for REITWise 2015, NAREIT's Law, Accounting, and Finance Conference. I'm joined by Frank Burt, Senior Vice President and General Counsel with Boston Properties. Frank, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here today.
Now, can you start by talking a little bit about how the role of REIT General Counsel as in-house gatekeeper has evolved over the years?
Well, I really think it's changed a lot because of the ever-changing nature of the risks that are faced by in-house counsel. Both the kinds of risks and the severity of them. For example, there are financial risks that are faced, and you work with the audit committee on that. There are compensation risks, and dealing with those, you deal with the compensation committee just to make sure that incentives for the executives don't encourage improper behavior. All the way down the lines to fraud investigations, et cetera. And the role of the general counsel really is twofold when it comes to the board and to the senior executives. Is first to articulate the risks so they understand them, and then you have a substantive role as well in terms of providing substantive legal advice. But that's made even more difficult by the fact that you have to be careful in some of these cases when they could potentially lead to litigation, to really separate out your business advice from your litigation advice, because only the legal advice you give is protected. So there are a lot of complexities to it, and it's sort of ever-changing.
And what stands as the biggest compliance challenge people in your position face?
Again, it's sort of twofold, I would think. First of all, is satisfying the requirements of your investors and your shareholders. And they're many-fold. And so, for example, you see proxy access proposals are coming from shareholders from nowadays. And every season it seems that there's another issue that rises to the forefront. So, keeping on top of both the substantive requirements and really determining what's in the best interest of the board. So you have those, and then there are your legal requirements that are coming at you from many different substantive areas. They can be litigation requirements. I'm not a litigator by training, but as a general counsel, you have to be familiar to them with the new e-discovery rules, and then it can be run as far afield as the dealing with social media policies, the requirements of the National Labor Relations Board that figure into how you do that. So there are just a lot of different areas to keep on top of.
And lastly, what impact do you think the Dodd-Frank clawback provision could have on corporate governance?
It's interesting because there are clawback rules that are already in effect today that came out of Sarbanes-Oxley, a little more limited, just apply to the CEO and the CFO. The Dodd-Frank ones, we have a statute which has some very basic requirements, but we're all waiting the regulations. So companies have to decide, do we go out today and come up with our own policy, not quite knowing what those regulations might be, and you're forced to make decisions about things, for example, who should it apply to? Should misconduct be required? And is the clawback, does it only apply to the excess earnings that one might have received as opposed to your entire incentive compensation? So those are difficult challenges to face. And some companies choose to sit back on the sidelines and say, I'm going to wait and see what the regulations actually say, where other companies, and Boston Properties falls into this, sort of feel it's become a best practice to deal with it. But I think it does add another layer to the employees that are subject to it, just to be as careful as you possibly can to be accurate, which is probably a good thing.
Great. Frank, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you having me today.
For more on this and other REIT news and analysis, be sure to visit REIT.com.